Here are 10 things you might not but should probably know about your new PS5. So the PS5's been out for around a year and a half at this point, but Sony's done a really good job updating the firmware of the console and adding in features that they come up with on their own, and also features that people are asking for all the time. I made one of these videos back when the PS5 came out, but it's changed so much since then that now I wanted to dig into 10 of my favorite hidden tricks, tips, and secrets that you might not know about. And hey, if you've been watching for a while, you might have heard some of these tips and tricks before, but there's 10 of them, so you probably got something new here that you haven't heard before. So the first thing you're going to want to make sure you have turned on your PS5 is automatic game boost. This is a feature that was brought over from the PS4 Pro, and it's made for PS4 games, and what it does is make sure that they're running at the absolute best possible way that they can be run. A great example of a game that looks and runs phenomenally with Game Boost is Elden Ring. It has some issues with graphics and pop-in and slowdown and textures and all the different things that From Software games tend to have when they come out. But if you use the PS4 version of the game running with the Game Boost turned on, you actually get the smoothest performance across the board of any console period. And that's PC included, because that port is a huge mess. It does not run or look nearly as good as it does on the PlayStation 5. Honestly, the two best places you can play Elden Ring right now are the PS5 running the PS4 version or on the Steam Deck, because Valve fixed what From Software has not fixed yet over a month after the game came out. There are a ton of games that take advantage of this boost mode in addition to Elden Ring, but where you're really going to see the best performance out of it is with PlayStation Studios games. God of War, for example, runs at 4K 60 frames per second. It's an adaptive 4K for sure, but it runs extremely close to a native 4K, which is awesome. Days Gone is absolutely the best it can be on the PS5. It runs at a dynamic 4K at 60 frames per second, pretty much locked, whereas on the PS4 Pro, it was running at a checkerboarded 4K at 30 frames per second, and it dropped below 30 frames per second a lot. And The Last of Us Part 2 plays at 1440p upscaled to 4K, but unlike the PS4 Pro, which is locked at 30 frames per second, this game runs at 60 on the PlayStation 5, and if you haven't, you should really go back and run through some of the combat scenarios in that game at 60 frames per second. They're so much more realistic, so much more visceral, and so much more fun. So yeah, I feel like this first tip really speaks for itself. This is not on by default, so make sure the first time you turn on your PS5, or if you can't remember if you turn this on yourself, go into the settings and make sure that Game Boost is on. Now, this next tip only applies to people who bought a PS5 with a disc drive, but you should be buying physical games if you have that disc drive PS5. Now, there's a ton of great benefits to buying games physically. First of all, when you put the disc in your PS5, you're gonna get some version of the game copied to your SSD, and then you'll only have to patch it instead of downloading the entire game from the internet, which takes a long time, especially if you're doing it around launch when everyone else is trying to download the game from PlayStation servers. And also, this is definitely not an ad for Best Buy, but for a lot of PlayStation exclusive games, they include a free steelbook with a ton of these if you buy them at launch. I just picked up Ghostwire Tokyo for PS5 thanks to my buddy Rich, who gave me a gift card, and it came along with an awesome steelbook. And the coolest thing is, you can actually go back on the Best Buy website and buy steelbooks for games that people never picked up. And usually they're like $2.99, $2 or $3. So even if you have the digital PS5 and you want some representation of your favorite games that you have on the console, you can get these steelbooks even though they don't have a disc in them to put them on your shelf, and they're really cheap. But the biggest and best reason you should be buying physical games versus digital is that a lot of the time they'll be a lot cheaper. Now, this is gonna surprise a lot of you guys, but there's a store called GameStop that still exists, and they have used games, and those are usually up to like half off compared to the new price digitally, but still, you can also get new games from them, Best Buy, Target, Amazon, and a lot of the time they'll be around half the price that they are at any given time on the PlayStation Store. A great example is the director's cut of Ghost of Tsushima. That game goes on sale for like 20 or 30 bucks physically all the time, and the best thing is, if Amazon marks it down to 20 bucks, every other store will copy them, and if they don't, you can walk into Best Buy with your phone on that Amazon page and say, hey, Amazon is selling this game for 20 bucks right now, you gotta price match it. And they'll definitely do it. I price match stuff there all the time. Now, back in the PS4 days, Sony's sales on the PlayStation Store were amazing. You could get games for like $5 or $10, and if you had PS Plus, they'd be even cheaper. But for some reason, when we switched over to the PS5 generation, those sales have been just as frequent, but Sony's been a lot stingier with the discounts, which sucks. So you can kind of get around that by getting disc versions of the games. And yeah, even though most of these discs are just like license checkers for your PS5, there's still content on there that's going to stop you from having to download the entire game at launch. Now, I've done a few videos here on the channel talking about how to upgrade the internal storage of your PS5, but there's a cheaper and easier way to do it if you just want to store some games you aren't playing. So if you pick up a portable SSD or even a USB 3.0 drive, my favorite is the Samsung T5 if we're talking about external SSDs, you can actually store your games for PS5 or PS4 on that SSD if you're not playing them. And with the PS4 games, you'll be able to run them off of that SSD. Now, the reason you might want to do that is the same reason I said to buy physical games. If you delete a game because you need space for a brand new game, but then you want to go back and play that old game, instead of downloading the entire thing from the internet, which can take a long time, you can just transfer it back from your external SSD. And if it has any patches, you'll have to download those, but it'll take overall way less time than if you had to download the entire thing from scratch. Also, these external SSDs can sometimes be around half the cost of an internal SSD, especially the internal SSDs that you need with a heatsink for the PS5. A lot of these manufacturers are realizing how in demand these things are, so they're jacking up the prices and not really doing a lot of sales. But with the external SSDs, they don't really do the same thing because they know you can't run PS5 games off of them. So if you've got a ton of games downloaded to your PS5 and you're sick of having to delete them and re-download them whenever you want to play them, I've got my favorite external SSDs linked down in the description for you to check out. So this feature was definitely a little buggy when the PS5 came out because it was turning people's TVs on and off randomly when they weren't home, but it's since been fixed and I use it all the time. I'll get back to the video in a sec, but real quick, I gotta pay some bills by thanking the sponsor of this video, NordVPN. At this point, you probably know what a VPN is and why you should be using one, but if you don't, NordVPN is the perfect solution for you. There are a lot of reasons you should be using a VPN. First of all, it stops your ISP from tracking what you're doing, and it also stops throttling when you're downloading huge games. NordVPN has over 5,200 super fast servers in 59 countries. They protect your confidential information, they've got 24/7 customer support, and you can use NordVPN to access streaming services libraries from other countries, like Netflix. What sets NordVPN apart from its competition is the fact that it has special threat protection. We're talking stuff like web trackers, harmful websites, infected files, and intrusive and malicious ads. NordVPN was kind enough to hook up PSReady viewers with a special trial. All you have to do is go to nordvpn.com/stayready to take advantage of it, and it's definitely worth doing because there's a risk-free 30-day money-back guarantee. Look, there's no reason why in 2022 you shouldn't be using a VPN, so make sure you check out the link in the description to get this exclusive offer from NordVPN. And thanks again for sponsoring this video. If you go into the settings app and then find the screen settings and then go into the HDMI submenu, you can turn on HDMI link for turning the TV on and off with your DualSense controller. And in recent updates, Sony has updated this feature to make it so that you can set individually. If you want your DualSense to turn your TV on, you can turn that on as one toggle, and if you just wanted to turn it off, that's another toggle. Now, once you turn these features on, if your PS5 and TV are off, if you hit the PS button on your DualSense controller, when your PS5 turns on, your TV will turn on with it, and if your TV is on and your PS5 is on and you put it in rest mode, your TV will turn off as well. Now, for me personally, I only leave the turn on setting on because there have been a few times where my PS5 goes into power saving rest mode while I'm on a different input watching Discovery Plus, because Sony does not have a Discovery Plus app, which sucks, and then my PS5 turns off my TV while I'm using it. It's kind of annoying, but if the PS5 is the only thing connected to your TV, I think you're probably good to leave the HDMI link that turns your TV off on. This next one is more of a secret and less of a tip. So I was browsing through the PS5 subreddit while I was writing out the script for this video, and I saw a video from a user who was playing Horizon Forbidden West and realized that if you eject the disc while the game is playing, it'll bring you back to the home screen. But if you put the disc back in your PS5 and start up Horizon Forbidden West, or presumably any other game, it'll put you right back in the game where you left off. So by taking the disc out, it just basically pauses the game and puts it into a rest mode type state. Now, I'll admit from the outside, now that I've seen this happen, it kind of makes a lot of sense. Like, why would the PS5 just quit the game? But I'm 99% certain that if you did the same thing on the PS4, it would take you to the home screen and also quit the game. And since, you know, it takes a little bit to get back into games, you can live happy knowing that if your cat or your dog or your girlfriend or your boyfriend or your husband or your wife or your kid or your nephew or anyone in your life or even you manages to hit that eject button while you're playing a game, you can just pop the disc disc right back in and pick up right where you left off. Now, what I'd really like to see is if you were running the game, right? Like if you had the disc in for Horizon Forbidden West and you were in the game and then you took the disc out and then bought the digital version, would it then unlock and allow you to go right back into the game? Someone out there try that out. Drop your own $70 because I don't want to buy another copy of Horizon Forbidden West. So now that we're a year and a half into the PS5's life cycle, I have finally adjusted to all the different button presses and combinations you have to do to put your PS5 into rest mode. I know, first world problem. I still have it ingrained in me how I did it on the PS4, but I've managed to remember how to do it without looking on the PS5 thanks to the fact that Sony allows you to move the little charms around in that game-based control center thing that comes up when you tap the PlayStation button. So if you put it into edit mode, you can move that little power charm exactly where it was on the PS4, and then it's kind of a little bit different, but it's still just as close to the PS4 as you're going to be able to get. And speaking of the PS button, this is like a little bonus tip. If you hold the PlayStation button, not only will it eventually take you back to the home screen no matter where you are in the PS5's UI, if you hold it a little bit longer, it'll shut your DualSense controller off completely. So if you're one of those people who thinks that the shortest version of the auto turn off for the DualSense controller is a little too long because the battery sucks so bad, just know you can keep holding that PS button and after a few seconds, it'll just turn off. Now, I'm not gonna sit here and rank the buttons on the DualSense controller. Maybe I will though in a future video. Anyway, one of my favorite buttons on the controller is that share button, all jokes aside. It's great to be able to take screenshots and recordings whenever you want. It sucks that you can't record the home screen of the PS5 with the built-in recording software, but hey, that's a complaint for another video. But one thing that's really cool you can do with that share button is actually determine what a long press and a short press does in the settings menu. So if you go into the settings app and go to captures and broadcasts, you can not only set what each button press does for the share button, you can also set the recording length, you can set the video quality, you can do all sorts of stuff. So if you've never gone into that share button menu, make sure you check it out because there's actually some cool stuff in there. And continuing on with that tip, another one I have while you're in that menu is to go into the trophies section and you can determine whether or not it takes a video, a screenshot, or nothing at all every time you get a trophy. Honestly, I keep this feature off. I used to think it was really cool that it would make a little screenshot or a little video when I was getting trophies every 5 minutes in Spider-Man Miles Morales, but eventually, I'm just gonna be real, it got super annoying, so I turned it off completely. And I've seen a lot of people asking if you can turn that feature off because eventually those trophy screenshots and videos will take up a lot of space on your precious 600 plus gigabytes of your SSD. So yeah, again, if you've never gone into that broadcast and captures menu, you should definitely check it out because you can tweak some stuff in there that's actually pretty cool. Next up, we're staying in the general settings menu of the PS5 because once you're in there, you can set the default difficulty of a game from the PS5 settings, which is that's actually cool. So once you're in settings, go over to the save data and game/app settings submenu. And once you're in there, you can pick your preferred game mode settings between fidelity and performance. You can change the default difficulty and you can change the inverted or non-inverted camera control. Now I'm gonna be real, this is a tip that I didn't even know about my PS5 when I was making this video. So immediately I went over to it and I set it to make sure that every game I start up is in performance mode because I want that 60 FPS if I can get it. And I set my custom difficulty to hard because that's where I like to play my games. But if you're a normal gamer, you can set it to normal and you'll be just fine. Now, to be real, I don't mess around with the camera inversion because I honestly don't know a single person who uses inverted camera controls in my real life. I'm sure you're out there. Please don't yell at me in the comments below. And this last tip is one I absolutely love as a PC gamer. So if you ever use the Steam app, any game you've ever bought and played, you see right next to the play button how long you've played it. It's a great little stat, so you can sit there and just think about how you've spent 500 hours playing Destiny 2 on Steam. But that one, that might be just me. Anyways, it was always weird on consoles to not have that same feature, but Sony has actually added it with the PS5. It's a little more complicated, but it is there. All you have to do is go to the home screen, select your avatar icon, then go to your profile, and then once you're there, select games, and you'll see the stats option. And once you go into that stats option menu, you can see next to each individual game that you've played, how long you've played it, which is sweet. I know it's nothing too crazy, but if you want to brag to your friends about how many hours you've spent grinding away in Elden Ring, here is your opportunity. So those are 10 of my favorite tips and tricks for the PS5. I'm sure I missed some, so let me know your favorites down in the comments below so I have some more to pull for another video. Look, there's no reason why in 2022 you shouldn't be using a VPN, so make sure you check out the link in the description to get this exclusive offer from NordVPN. And thanks again for sponsoring this video.